There is no compromise between a firefighter and an arsonist. And Donald Trump wants to burn down democracy. And he wants to start by pouring gasoline on the elections in California and lighting a match. And if you are doing anything to give him comfort there, anything other than getting a hose and putting out the fire, it's a fool's game.
Hello, and welcome to the PoliticsGirl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. So over the years, I've had the great fortune of becoming friends with Democratic super lawyer Marc Elias. Without making it sound like I'm tooting my own horn, I feel as if Marc and I are on the same page when it comes to building our careers around saving American democracy rather than our own personal well-being. And it's been such a pleasure for me to get to know someone like him who shares the same moral center and goals as me, someone who isn't putting money and popularity above what's right. Anyway, I deeply connect with Marc, even if I am well below him in my ability to make change. I thoroughly appreciate his vision and his work ethic, and I am grateful to know him. I'm having Marc on the show today to talk about where we are with voting rights in America, right after the Alabama decision by the Supreme Court, which allowed them to keep their most recent and deeply racist gerrymander, all but drawing black voters out of any sort of representative choice. I wrote him to see if he would come on to explain this particular case to us and how it fits into the bigger picture of future fair elections. If you don't know Marc, he is an American lawyer, the founder of the Elias Law Group, a mission-driven firm committed to helping citizens vote and progressives make change. He is also the founder of Democracy Docket, the leading progressive source of information, analysis, and opinions about voting rights, elections, and democracy. And he's a man who has continued to protect our rights and votes even as everyone around him seemed far too ready to capitulate. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, creator of Democracy Docket, founder of the Elias Law Group, and my personal favorite lawyer, Marc Elias. Welcome back, Marc.
Thanks for having me back.
Well, thanks for coming. I want you guys to know that Marc and I have known each other for years because we run in the same I believe in America and still believe it can be fixed with hard work circle. But I've actually got to meet Marc in real life a couple months ago in DC. And I got to tell you, this man is mad tall. I was like, Marc, what the hell? You're a giant, like not just in the legal field, but like in real life. You are distractingly tall, sir. And I did not know this until I met you in real life.
Yeah, I get this a lot. I don't know what people expect. Maybe it's because like when you're sitting and you're in front of a camera, like everybody looks the same height. But yeah, I am 6'5" for people out there who don't know.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I was like, Marc, what's happening here? You were like, I know, I got it. I'm really tall.
I get that a lot. Yeah.
So listen, I called you this month because of the Supreme Court decision on Alabama's racial gerrymandering. And the time the decision came down, you wrote in Democracy Docket that the decision was, and to quote you directly, so fucking cynical you had no words. So I want to start there and then I want to move on to California. Let's talk about Alabama first. Talk us through what happened, how we should feel about what happened, and finally what you think we should do about what happened. Yeah,
so I have to say, I have generally kept a relatively even keel about court cases, and I counsel that to people that you know you're going to win more cases than you lose if things go well, but there are going to be really great highs in those victories, and there are going to be lows when you lose cases, and you can't lose perspective. And you're right, I lost perspective in some sense, I think for good reasons, over what we saw in really three back-to-back rulings by the Supreme Court. So first, you had the Calais decision itself, which was the decision gutting Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Okay, so after decades and decades of applying a standard for Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, having been told by the Chief Justice in the Shelby County case, don't worry, Section 2 remains vibrant nationwide. Here we are in 2026, and they gut Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. What I described as the worst decision of my lifetime, and I stand by that. In rapid succession thereafter came two cases, one on the shadow docket out of Louisiana, and then the other out of the shadow docket in Alabama. And in both cases, the question was, what do we do for 2026? Right? So understanding that the Supreme Court ruled that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is gutted, we are in the middle of primaries, and this conservative Supreme Court has been lecturing us, has been lecturing trial judges for years, saying you cannot grant relief to Black voters, for example, on the eve of primary elections because it's too disruptive. And so, you can't change the rules of voting. You can't make voting easier if it's too close to an election because it confuses all the election officials and there's chaos. And so what I reacted to in Alabama was that in 2021, my law firm sued Alabama over its racially gerrymandered and its maps that were illegal under the Voting Rights Act. We filed that lawsuit in November. We won that case by the end of January of 2022. The Supreme Court told us in early February 2022, I'm sorry, Black voters, you can't have relief for the 2022 election cycle because the primary elections are, wait for it, 4.5 months from now. It's simply too close to the primaries to upend the state of Alabama's election systems. So Black voters, you are out of luck for 2022. You need to live under illegal maps that deprive your voting rights for the 2022 election cycle. So the reason why I reacted the way I did is because now here we are in 2026. And in the case of Louisiana, voting in the primary had begun. In the case of Alabama, the state of Alabama wants to change its maps literally in June, which, we were told it was too late to change the maps in Alabama a couple of years ago in early February. And now the Alabama wants to change it in June. And the Supreme Court's like, yeah, no problem. No problem, Alabama, you can change the maps. No problem, Louisiana, you can change the maps. So when I said that this is just like too cynical, I don't have any words. I mean, I cannot articulate or explain to you or to the audience how it could possibly be that it was too late when Black voting rights was at stake and it was February for a June primary. But it is not too late when, in their view, white voters' vote rights are at stake and they're ruling in June for a June primary. These things don't kind of add up.
Is this not what happens over and over again? Is this not what the people of America, if you are paying attention, are seeing over and over again? It not that Mitch McConnell who said it is too early? We cannot have a new judge put in the Supreme Court in an election year. We cannot possibly do it when Scalia died in January because the election was in November and it was too close and the voters needed to decide. And then when RBG died, when voting had already started, they pushed Amy Coney Barrett through in 6 days. So it's it seems to me that rules apply to one party and they do not apply to the other party. And that is to get an overall result that many of the members in the 6-3 court of the Supreme Court want themselves. We know very well that John Roberts has been talking about gutting the Voting Rights Act since the 80s. He has hated it since the 80s. He is now in charge of a court that is allowing him to do it, and they're going along with it. So it all feels kind of part and parcel of the same thing. Am I crazy in thinking that?
No, I think you're right. I think the reason why, and I don't want to sound naive, but the reason why it is still shocking to me is because, yeah, you're right. That was what Mitch McConnell did, and it was hypocrisy, and that's par for the course with Republicans in the Senate. I kind of thought that John Roberts, who, as you pointed out, has wanted to gut the Voting Rights Act now for decades, would be like, you know what? I can live with one more seat in a couple of places and not look like we have created a double standard, and I get everything I want starting in 2028, and I get a lot of what I want in other states in 2026. And sure, it doesn't happen in Alabama and Louisiana this time, but that's a price I'm willing to pay for the sake of not looking utterly inconsistent. I was wrong. They seem to be fine with looking utterly inconsistent.
Because they're drunk on power, Mark. They're drunk on power. They're getting exactly what they want. And it doesn't matter if it looks like we have no rule of law anymore. There's no consistency in the law, or the law applies to some and not to others. I mean, it just seems like, well, too bad. What are you going to do about it? And I think that's one of the other things I want to talk to you about today, because I think that if you are running as a Democrat right now, or you're running against the Republican Party, whatever you happen to call yourself, one of the things you need to be running on is court reform, because clearly this cannot carry on. Yeah,
this is unsustainable. And look, I was not as early to the court reform movement as many, but earlier than most Democrats. And I think that there is a lot of the throat clearing, norms adhering sort of part of the Democratic Party that we need to sort of get over, right? Like the Biden era was, for all of its good things, it one of its downsides was that it did not, they did a commission on court reform and came to the conclusion not to reform the courts.
Yeah, they sure did.
Yeah, right. So I think that when Democrats have power, yeah, we need to reform the courts. We need to think much more imaginatively about what kind of law changes we want to voting and democracy. And, look, we can start right now with redistricting. And you ask, what can people do? And, one thing we can do is we can insist on democracy being a front burner issue when Democrats take charge. We can insist democracy being a front burner issue in the states where Democrats already have control at the state level. But, the other thing we can be doing is looking at the redistricting process with the same level of aggression and the same ruthlessness that Republicans do. And that means, when we get into 2027, there are a whole bunch of places, including Colorado, including Virginia, including Washington State and Oregon, and by the way, California again, and Illinois and Maryland and New York. New York may be the biggest one. Maybe I should have started there. Like we need to be looking at all of these places and saying, what can we do to press advantage, not in sorrow, but in full-throated embracing. And so, I think that is going to be a task that is both a democracy task, a legislative task, and a mindset shift as we head towards 2027.
Yeah, because it's clearly an existential crisis at this point. I don't think we can pretend. I often make the analogy that if you are the best boxer in the world and you're in the ring and you're taking your jabs and you think you're getting your points and your opponent keeps kicking you in the head and the ref doesn't call it, then you either learn to UFC fight or you lose. And Democrats keep saying, you're not allowed to do that. Hey, that's not fair. Hey, he's not allowed to do that. And if the ref doesn't care, then you better learn to fight the way the other people are fighting. And they have had a 40-year plan that we are seeing come to fruition. They think way out. What do we want the country to look like 40 years from now? We need to say, what do we want the country to be fair? We want to have a living wage. We want to see our children. We want to have clean water. We want to, we have to have plans. And then we have to set up the wins that would allow us to have those plans in the future. And I think we've been very short-sighted in this. And I think we keep thinking, if I just reach across the aisle one more time, they won't smack my hand. And I think that's not the way we have to look at it now. We have to be really realistic about what we're dealing with. I think when people say the Democrats want to stack the courts, I say the courts are already stacked. That's done. What we should want to do is reform it. We should want to expand it. We should want to make justice more fair for everyone. It shouldn't be that you come to the Supreme Court and you know exactly the result you're going to get because you know which judges you have in your corner. That should never be. And there's lots of different tacks that we could take to make it more just and fair. And we just don't take it over and over again.
Yeah. And I think you hit on a really important point that I want everyone to hear and to understand. When we say that the Chief Justice has wanted to overturn the Voting Rights Act for 40 years or longer, what that means is that as a lawyer in the Department of Justice under Ronald Reagan, at the same time that Ronald Reagan was reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act in 1982 and calling it the crown jewel of American liberty, there was already a conservative movement that was planning how to undo it. And I feel like sometimes with Democrats, if there isn't a solution that can be implemented in the next 2 months or 3 months, we run out of patience. And so, look, we don't want everything to have to take decades, but I agree with you. We need to think big and we need to think bold. And that means being willing to be patient and driving towards those bigger and bolder things rather than saying, well, we can't get those big, bold things. So instead, let's find a compromise that is, 1/20th of a loaf and ticking it off the list as a win.
Yeah. And that's why people hate incrementalists. They hate centrists. They're frustrated by it. They're at the point now where they think, no, don't tell me that we can take, we'll take 20 cents more an hour for our minimum wage. Tell me that you are working for a living wage within this economy, at this interest rate, at this inflation rate that I could actually live on. tell me that you're working towards that. Don't be like, well, this is the best that we could get. You guys should be happy about it, because that is not what the opposition has done the entire time. They've said, you want women back in the kitchen? Let's get them back there. You want no abortion? Let's do that. You want to make sure that Black people don't have votes anymore? We will work for that. You know what I mean? And that's where we are right now. And I think, okay, so what's our response to that? I mean, I'd love to talk a little bit about what's happening in California right now after this primary election took place, because the Republicans seem to be going to extraordinary lengths. I mean, from the federal level with Donald Trump and the congressional Republicans, all the way down to California candidates themselves, to claim that this California primary is all election fraud. This idea that unless Donald Trump's chosen candidate for governor, Steve Hilton, or Donald Trump's chosen candidate for LA Mayor, Spencer Pratt, win, the entire thing is rigged. And I think that is so asinine, because even just logically, even just with math, there are more than twice as many registered Democrats in California than Republicans, 4 times as many in Los Angeles itself. Both men Donald Trump promoted are terrible MAGA candidates. California is a deep blue state. And yet this idea that if the Republican doesn't win, or in this case, get on the ballot for the general election in November, then the Democrats have to be cheating. Everything is rigged. The federal government should be taken in, they should come into California and take over. It's insane. Of course, Democrats are winning in California. If you can't believe that a Democrat can win in California, then you can no longer believe anything. And what are we even doing here? And I think that you think this is just the beginning of this shenanigans.
I do. I think we are at the front end of this. This is, I worry that Democrats hear these attacks on California, and they discount it and say, oh, this is just Donald Trump being crazy. No, this is actually much worse than that. So California represents to Donald Trump 2 things that he cannot tolerate, 2 things that he will increase the rhetoric around and increase the attacks on. And we have seen what happens when Donald Trump does that around elections. The first thing is, and I say this, by the way, as a native New Yorker, I am not a partisan for California. Okay. And you are, right.
But this is my town, right. Baby.
So you're going to like this. California represents to him what success in a democratically run state is. I mean, California is one of the largest economies in the world. It is the leader of innovation and technology. It is the leader of culture around the world and in the United States. And it has succeeded with democratic control of government. And Donald Trump just can't abide this. Like, he cannot tolerate and he cannot accept the idea that California has not bent red. Like, even as other blue states, have bent a little red here and there, he can't point to that in California. He can't point to the election in which he says, oh, look, they really love me there. He knows that Californians hate him. He knows that Californians are going to elect a Democratic governor. They're going to elect a Democratic mayor in LA. And that when it came to standing up to his gerrymandering, what did California do? California, by popular vote, resoundingly said, we reject Trumpism and we want new districts. So at a psychological level, California represents something that is the antithesis of MAGA and the antithesis of Trumpism. And I could go on and on about J.D. Vance and J.D. Vance's whole notion that, that we are, defined as a country by where our ancestors are buried. California is the rejection of all of that, right? California is the ethos of American exceptionalism through immigration and through ingenuity and through, a vibrant, dynamic society and economy. So that's the first thing. The second is just as a matter of math. If Donald Trump is to rig the 2026 election, if he is to subvert the outcome of the 2026 election, California is the key. For those of you who have focused on presidential elections, what Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan are to presidential elections, California is by itself in congressional elections, right? It's a huge number of seats. And so if Donald Trump wants to try to subvert the will of the electorate, if he wants to say that the elections need to be set aside or they need to be challenged or whatever, like the one state you need to follow is California. And that is why he is attacking it. That is why his political cronies are attacking it. That is the reason why, you have these bogus claims of fraud. You have his U.S. attorneys. Today, you had the U.S. attorney in Manhattan, trying to sow some uncertainty or doubt about the California elections. So we're going to see a lot more lying about California. But I want to end with this. You and I just got done talking about how Donald Trump will weaponize incrementalism against Democrats and progressives. If you are out there thinking, well, let's just hear them out. Let's just meet them halfway. I mean, maybe they have some ideas about California. Maybe it does take too long, right? If you buy into that frame, all you are doing is giving fodder to Donald Trump and the big lie. There is no compromise between a firefighter and an arsonist. And Donald Trump wants to burn down democracy. And he wants to start by pouring gasoline on the elections in California and lighting a match. And if you are doing anything to give him comfort there, anything other than getting a hose and putting out the fire, it's a fool's game.
This episode of the Politics Girl podcast is brought to you by Wild Grain. Wild Grain is the first bake from frozen subscription box for sourdough breads, artisanal pastries, and fresh pastas. All of the items bake in 25 minutes or less, and unlike store-bought options, Wild Grain only uses simple ingredients you can actually pronounce and a slow fermentation process that's easier on your stomach and richer in nutrients and antioxidants. No preservatives, no shortcuts. Wild Grain boxes are fully customizable. There is a variety box, a gluten-free box, a vegan box, and even a new protein box. They even have their own slow-churned French butter that pairs perfectly with their breads. Coming into summer, we have the big salads and cheese plates and fresh tomatoes and burrata. But how much better is all of that fresh food paired with warm sourdough right out of the oven? Wild Grain is perfect for easy dinners, lazy weekend mornings with their pastries, or even the perfect sandwich on fresh bread. Imagine having fresh bakery-quality bread, pastries, and pasta at home without any trips to the store. And don't just take my word for it. They have over 40,000 five-star reviews and have been voted the best food subscription box by USA Today for 3 years in a row. Right now, for a limited time, Wild Grain is offering our listeners $30 off your first box, plus croissants for life, when you go to wildgrain.com/politicsgirl and start your subscription today. That's $30 off your first box and free croissants for life when you visit wildgrain.com/politicsgirl. So my dad recently came to visit us for my son's graduation, and he arrived from Canada with his little carry-on. And I took one look at his bag and I thought, no, I have to get this man a Noble suitcase. Noble is the #1 top-rated luggage on Trustpilot. While most luggage is simply a box on wheels, nothing about it actually makes travel easier, Noble has done it completely differently. First, the entire suitcase has no zippers at all. It locks shut with a latch system that can't be pried open. It has 360-degree wheels, which makes it effortless to pull along so it glides next to you instead of dragging behind you like an anchor, which, for someone like my 82-year-old father, is particularly helpful. There is a laptop pocket in the front that makes going through TSA easy. My dad doesn't carry a laptop, but he has an iPad, so it will fit perfectly into that pocket. There's also a built-in charging port to keep your phone alive so you're not crawling under a chair, trying to plug in your phone at the gate, or like my father, watching your battery die and then panicking. And finally, there is a cup holder. They built a flip-out cup holder right into the luggage. Total lifesaver in lines, at the gate, or just to make your travel day a little more convenient. Plus, the bag looks good. Its sleek minimalist shape comes in different styles and colors, and you can really personalize it to you. And like many of the things I talk about on this show, this is a company that puts its money where its mouth is. So each Noble suitcase comes with a 100-day money-back guarantee and a lifetime warranty. This is a company that truly stands behind what they've made. So upgrade to luggage that looks better and lasts longer so you can travel smarter. Head to nobletravel.com for up to 46% off your entire order. That's NOBL travel.com for up to 46% off. And after you purchase, if they ask you where you heard about them, please support the show and tell them we sent you.
If you are doing anything to give him comfort there, anything other than getting a hose and putting out the fire, it's a fool's game.
Yeah. Absolutely a fool's game. And I have to say, this idea that Republicans are acting right now like Democrats are just adding ballots to the mix or they're voting after Election Day. I want to be clear to people, this is completely false. We have an election code in California that gives county elections officials up to 30 days after Election Day to complete the process, which includes counting the votes, but also verifying the votes are cast by valid American citizens who are allowed to vote in this state. This idea that California doesn't require voter ID is wrong. It's just we do it in the opposite order. You don't have to go to the polls and show your ID to vote, but you do have to prove your citizenship and show ID to register. And then your vote is cross-referenced with that registration, with your ID, with your address. And that takes a while. The reason our elections take so long, our state has so many people. It's
Right.
absurd. People forget how big we are. But also because our election officials are literally ensuring everything has been done correctly. This implication that if it's not done fast or that if a Republican doesn't win, it's corrupt is bullshit. And I need people to understand that. I was allowed to register to vote in California at my citizenship swearing in. I had lived in California for years before. I couldn't vote here. I had to wait till I was sworn in as a citizen. And then as I was there, they said, would you like to register to vote? And I said, yes, I would love to register to vote. But you have to show that you are A, a citizen, B, you live at the residence you live at. This idea that people are going to come in from Texas and vote for Spencer Pratt because no one cares about election ID in California. I'm like, that's wrong. You can go in and ask for a provisional ballot, but once they check your name, they're like, this isn't a real voter. And in fact, you just committed a crime. So these people that think they're so smart here that we just don't have any voter ID and I can use my gym membership and I can vote 57 times, none of that is true. And it's exhausting to perpetually hear people spin this lie over and over again, because what it feels like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Republicans, specifically Donald Trump, because he needs California to make sure that he doesn't lose the House, are using these false claims of voter fraud in California to get a case, I think, up to the Supreme Court to either get the governor he wants or to justify some sort of federal takeover of all the elections in the fall because of all the corruption, right? And I look at people, and these are the names that people are not going to recognize, and I might even butcher them when I say them, so please correct me if I'm wrong. We currently have a man named Bill Esseley, who's the top federal prosecutor for most of Southern California. He was put into power by Pam Bondi when she was attorney general, but he was never confirmed by the Senate, which he was supposed to have been. This is a guy who built his entire career on hardcore voter ID rules and Republican politics. He has already sent prosecutors to LA ballot counting rooms to watch, to ask questions. We also have a woman named Harmeet Dillon running the DOJ's Civil Rights Division in DC. This is another hardcore conservative California lawyer who Donald Trump nominated to the head of the Federal Civil Rights Division, which the Federal Civil Rights Division was built to enforce civil rights laws, including the right to vote. But under her, it has basically done the opposite. She is the one suing the states for their voter rolls. She is the one sending monitors to counties. She's the one treating ordinary voters as potential criminals who are trying to cheat in the elections when we have absolutely no evidence of that. And I feel like all of this behavior has nothing to do with finding fraud or corruption that's actually happening, but building the illusion of fraud so they can make that case in court. And I don't think they want to make that case in California court. They want to make that case to the Supreme Court, which they think they have in the bag. Am I completely off base there?
Yeah, I want to highlight a couple of things you said. You know, the irony of all of what the Republicans are saying is that if California wanted a fraudulent system, it could report the results right away. I mean, the whole reason why it takes so long in California is because of how many safeguards it has. I just like to put my cards on the table. I have been critical of California before because I think it does too many things to placate the Republicans' concerns about fraud. Like, I have said that I don't believe that states should be rejecting mail-in ballots using the junk science of signature matching. This is when a ballot is cast by mail, the voter signs the outer envelope, and when the election officials get it, they do in California, a very thorough review to see whether the signature on the outer envelope matches the signature on file with the government.
My pen didn't work once when I was
Right.
doing my signature on the outside of the envelope, and I panicked because I know how serious they are about matching the
Right.
signature. And I had to go back over it with the pen, and I thought, oh God, like what if they say it's not the right one?
Right.
So they're very serious.
So I have gone on record now for 5 years or more saying this is junk science and states should not be rejecting ballots based on signature mismatch. The fact is there is no science behind a person looking at two documents and saying that the signatures match or don't match. And handwriting experts will tell you that there's no science there. And by the way, the people doing this are not handwriting experts. And every year, hundreds of thousands of Americans are disenfranchised because some election official doesn't think their signature match. And California is one of the, in my view, one of the worst offenders. But it does this because the conservative machine says, when I say machine, the conservative, echo chamber says, oh, you have all of these fraudulent mail-in ballots. So California is going the extra mile and literally comparing these one by one in these counties to make sure that, frankly, my view, there weren't going to be any fraudulent votes, but no fraudulent votes get through. And if anything, they are disenfranchising lawful ballots to prevent voter fraud. So, the crazy thing about the Republican arguments about why this should take less time is it takes so much time because California does so many things to try to prevent voter fraud, which I don't believe exists. And I think a lot of these measures, frankly, should be done away with. But whatever, they exist as they are. But now Donald Trump is weaponizing all of those processes and all of that carefulness to somehow claim that there's fraud because it takes so long. Like I said, if California wanted to cheat, cheating doesn't take time. That's right. It's all of it. And by the way, the other thing about California is it's completely transparent. I mean, it is completely transparent. The reason why Republicans are able to lie is because LA County is transparent about the ballots that are being processed and added into the count, right? Does that seem like the kind of thing you would do if you were trying to cheat? No, right? You wouldn't be transparent. So I agree with you that this is all a big lie. And I agree with you that this is part of a larger plan that Donald Trump has, that Republicans have, that I think is less focused on the governorship and less focused on the mayoralship, and really is aimed at creating an environment so that as we head towards the fall and we head towards the congressional elections, and that Donald Trump is able to say, well, I don't think that the 8 seats or 10 seats or 12 seats, whatever it is, whatever the margin is, right? He'll decide later how many he needs that are in California in these places. I think they're fraudulent. And I don't think those elections should be certified. And if that sounds fanciful, I will point you to what I predicted before the 2020 election, and people thought I was being alarmist then. I will point you to what many of us said after the 2020 election when I was representing President Biden in the DNC in court. And I was saying, look, we're winning, but Donald Trump's not going to give up. And then you saw January 6th. And so, look, I don't know how this ultimately plays out, but everyone in this country, whether you're in California or not, we all need to become educated about what's going on. We cannot buy into this false equivalency and try to give Republicans credit for something here, because there's no credit to be given. Yeah. And we need to stand tall and stand proud and stand with courage, saying that we are not going to allow voters to be disenfranchised. We're not going to allow elections to be subverted.
Yeah, no, I think that's essential because as you're saying, it's part of a bigger plan. I mean, you were recently posting about how the American Postal Workers Union is feeling deeply alarmed about the new United States postal rule that was created to carry out Donald Trump's executive order around restricting mail-in voting. So can you tell me more about that? Because I feel like that's also part of the bigger plan.
Yeah, so we know that Donald Trump has been trying to have his Department of Justice collect voter files from every state. This is the most sensitive information that states maintain in their voting offices about you. It's your name, your address, your date of birth, your signature, as we were just talking about, whether you're a registered Democrat or Republican, what elections you voted in, what elections you haven't voted in, your social security number, whether you've moved, whether you've changed your registration. There's a lot of information that they maintain. And the Department of Justice has been trying to access this data everywhere. My law firm and I, we've been fighting them and winning. We're litigating against them in 30 places, and so far we're undefeated. We'll see if that continues. But they're trying to get this data because they want to create a national voter file. And recently, Donald Trump issued an executive order saying that he believes that the U.S. Postal Service should not be permitted to send an absentee ballot out or to return an absentee ballot if the voter is not on a list that has been vetted and approved by Donald Trump's DHS and Department of Justice. So, this is not about voter fraud. They're going to say this is about voter fraud. They're going to say this is about non-citizen voting. If you think Donald Trump is going to create a list of who is eligible to vote and who's not eligible to vote, and that is going to be a fair list, you are out of your minds. This is an effort by Donald Trump to create a national list of who gets to vote and who doesn't. And they're starting with mail-in voting because that is the place where they can start. But it's not going to end with mail-in voting. They will next be telling LA County, you know what, if Lee is not on this list and you let Lee vote, then we're going to prosecute you, election officials. So what's going to happen then, right? What's going to happen if election officials are facing getting a list from Donald Trump's Department of Justice, from Harmeet Dillon, someone you mentioned, where the U.S. attorney who you mentioned is sending a letter saying, hey, if you let Lee vote and she's not on Harmeet Dillon's list, we'll come at you.
Yeah, because if you have a list and you say, oh, who do we need to purge from this list? Who seems like they might be a dead person? Who seems like they might be the first people you go to are the registered Democrats? Get rid of them. Get rid of the list of people that speak up against you. Can't vote.
Yep.
And you show up to vote on voting day or you don't get your ballot and you're like, where's my ballot? They're like, oh, you're on the list now of people that can't vote. This is so obvious to me of what they're doing. And I just want to tell people, in case you're curious, voting by mail is done in a lot of states, right? It is safe. It is secure. It is reliable. It has been used by both political parties for years. In the 2024 election, nearly 48 million people, and that's almost 1/3 of the voters, voted by mail, and Trump won. So don't tell me that it's like terribly illegal and it's what the Democrats are using to cheat. And not for nothing, Donald Trump himself votes by mail.
And the irony of this is, to hammer home something you said, Florida became a Republican state largely because of vote by mail. I mean, it was the Republicans' effort to drive vote by mail that really turned that state. Arizona became a Republican state, or Republicans really gained an advantage because they embraced voting by mail. When Colorado went to all voting by mail, the first election, Mark Udall, the incumbent Democratic senator, lost to Cory Gardner. And it was widely understood that was because Republicans had invested in vote by mail. I mean, I could go on state after state until very recently. I mean, until Donald Trump, voting by mail was not viewed as a Democratic stronghold. If anything, Democrats were viewed as people who wanted to vote early, right? Souls to the polls, black voters, right? And it was Republican voters, particularly older Republican voters, that the Republican National Committee and others had invested in voting by mail. It's a very new phenomenon that there is this suggestion that somehow this is a Democratic method of voting. And that just shows that Donald Trump's pathology has infected the entire Republican Party.
The PoliticsGirl podcast is sponsored by Biologica. Biologica is a supplement formulated by doctors for women at every stage of their adult life. They focus on mood balance, energy and metabolism, digestive support, and restful sleep. There are 3 formulas for 3 hormonal stages: primary, age 18 to 45, midlife, age 40 to 55, and post-menopause, which is 50 plus. Each formula is designed to support what women experience in that time. You select your stage, pick your flavor, and feel the difference. I am in the midlife phase, so that's the Biologica I ordered. I ordered it in the cranberry lemonade flavor. It includes the critical nutrients I need without me having to take 7 different vitamins. It helps promote calm and emotional balance, which, let's be honest, I can use. It helps support deep and restorative sleep. It sharpens focus and cognitive clarity, and it supports energy metabolism and nourishes your digestive health and microbiomes. I am really looking forward to really getting this into my system. It is a drinkable daily supplement that goes well beyond multivitamins to include probiotics and electrolytes and clinically researched botanicals all in one drink. And because you're mixing it with water, it absorbs incredibly well. It's made with clean ingredients, no added sugar, and was developed with women's health experts who actually understand how much our nutritional needs change for us over time. If you want to try it with me, head to biologica.com/politicsgirl to get started. You can take their quick hormonal life stage quiz to find out the formula that's right for you. And right now, subscribers can receive up to 32% off their purchase. Again, make sure to go to biologica.com/politicsgirl to get up to 32% off for your first subscription when you order today. Okay, So as you may or may not know, my son Lachlan will be going off to college in the fall. And he was recently doing his laundry and he said, "Can I take laundry sauce with me to school?" So my teenage son was asking if he could take our particular laundry detergent with him to college. Tell me another laundry detergent that a teenager would even notice, let alone want to include in the things he takes off to school. Here's the thing. I know I sound like an idiot talking about how great laundry sauce is, how nice it smells, how well it cleans. The fact that they partnered with top perfumers in the world to make their sense. But nothing tells you how great it is better than an 18-year-old asking if he can continue to use it across the country. Our family goes back and forth between scents. We are currently on a Siberian pine and Indonesian patchouli kick. But maybe you want something more bright and citrusy for summer, then I would look into their Italian bergamot. Maybe you want something more rugged, then Australian sandalwood might be for you. Laundry Sauce recently came out with their first certified hypoallergenic fragrance made for sensitive skin types called Himalayan Cashmere, with notes of light floral and pear. And Laundry Sauce isn't just about smelling incredible, it's engineered for performance. Their highly concentrated pods are packed with the cleaning power of bioenzymes that obliterate stains and keep everything fresh. For a limited time, our listeners will get 20% off their entire order when they use the code PoliticsGirl20 at laundrysauce.com. That's 20% off their order at laundrysauce.com with the promo code PoliticsGirl20. And after you purchase, they're going to ask where you heard about them. Please support the show and tell them we sent you. laundrysauce.com, code PoliticsGirl20. Because it isn't just premium laundry pods, it is a full upgrade to your laundry routine. And it's Lachlan approved.
Donald Trump's pathology has infected the entire Republican Party.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, before Donald Trump, we didn't have fake news. We didn't have alternative facts. We didn't have every election is rigged. We didn't have the elections are stolen. We didn't have vote by mail is broken and evil. It's all Donald Trump working with his propaganda machine, of which you and I were talking earlier, is so much more effective than the truth machine that's out here now, to convince people that unless he is on top, it is fake. And I will say, you know, with someone like Louis DeJoy in charge of USPS, this is a man who Donald Trump put in that position in his first term, a man who has contributed millions of dollars to Trump's victory fund, a man who has zero direct postal service experience, who owns almost $100 million in assets in postal service competitors and contractors, which is ridiculous. He doesn't make me feel like voting by mail is particularly safe. You know, like I'm like, I don't know. So I get my vote by mail ballot at home, where I like to take my time and I research it and I fill it out. It takes me a long time. I will say, for the people that are questioning the California elections, I didn't vote until the day before the election because I wanted to see how the polling was working out for both the governor and the mayor to make sure that I was making a strategic vote in a primary. And then I walked it directly to a drop box, right? I put it in an election drop box. I would be more likely to walk into a local election office and hand it right to the registrar than I would to be putting it in the mail, especially late. But in general, just because of Louis DeJoy, I do not trust what he is doing. But the vote by mail can also go into your local drop box, which is what a lot of people do, which is why in the last election, we saw people setting those boxes on fire. And in the one in LA, we had some of them blowing up.
And why you have seen in state after state Republicans try to ban ballot drop boxes. I mean, I always ask myself, like, what about a secure metal container do you object to, right? Like they'll be like, oh, you should only be able to return your mail-in ballot through the Postal Service. I'm like, why is that more secure that it goes into a secure metal box or not secure metal box if it's at your house, then through the Postal Service? I'm not, by the way, this is no criticism of the Postal Service, but how is that better than just putting it in a secure metal container where the election officials open it themselves? I mean, the bottom line is Republicans want to make it harder for you to vote and easier for them to cheat. And everything they can do to make it harder for you to vote, they think redounds to their benefit. And that is part of what the stakes are for this election. But I also want to add one other thing. You know, you mentioned that we were discussing the media landscape, and there is a vast right-wing independent media sector that has been nurtured and funded and supported in all kinds of ways. And, you know, you have been part of building a progressive, truth-telling new media ecosystem that is more necessary than ever before. The legacy media is failing. They are failing democracy. They are failing businesses. And you have been at the forefront of helping build something that gives people the information they need about what's happening in their communities, what's happening in their democracy. And the price of that is that you get these these scurrilous attacks. And so I want to thank you for standing up to them. I want to thank you for everything you do. And I hope everyone who is watching this goes ahead and subscribes to this channel to make sure that you are able to build your voice so that it has the power and the reach that we need it to have as we head towards 2026 and beyond. So people can do me a favor, and right now, click the subscribe button, hit the bell to make sure you're alerted when there's new content, because we need Lee to be reaching more people in more places than is currently the case.
Mark, I appreciate that so much, because it's actually true. We are working a real uphill battle against a juggernaut of money and influence. And unfortunately, it makes the American people like they're living through a psyop of what happens when you repeat the same lie for a decade. You know, like you're watching people right now with the California election making statements about how corrupt the Democrats are, how we can't win unless we cheat. And they're doing it all without any evidence of these claims. You've got the Nick Shirleys of the world going around making up whatever they want to make up and people repeating it like it's truth. And I keep thinking, like, make it make sense. The Republican Party is in charge of everything at the federal level. Democrats lost all power in 2024. Even when we won in 2020, if we had cheated to do it, why on earth would we have also taken the Senate so we could have actually gotten stuff done that we wanted to get done? Every single argument about the Democrats cheating defies logic. Reading what the arguments people are making online is crazy making, but you have to have enough voices out there preaching the opposite so people don't lose the thread of the narrative. I mean, these people are still trying to pass or convince people that they need to pass the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act, of course, is a voter suppression act disguised as a voter protection act, but people genuinely don't understand that. So without voices out here explaining that, I'm seeing people all over, like, if we don't pass the SAVE Act, Elon Musk said it yesterday, America is destroyed. And I'm like, it's just another voter suppression act, this time, attacking women. We won't be able to vote in elections, which, they would love.
Yes. And you're right. The SAVE Act is a great example. I mean, the SAVE Act would impose a requirement to prove citizenship at the time that you register. There are only 3 documents that prove citizenship. And in this case, you're actually at an advantage over the rest of us because you have one of those documents, which are naturalization papers, right? Like one of the few documents that actually proves you're a U.S. citizen is if you were a naturalized citizen, you have paperwork that proves you're a citizen. But if you were born in the United States, there are only 2 things you could have. One is an unexpired passport, and the other is an original or certified copy of a birth certificate. And if you're a woman who changed their last name, or anyone who changed their last name for any reason, then the birth certificate doesn't do the trick because it won't have the same last name. And so now you're down to U.S. passports. And look, I'll be the first to say, for most of my life, I didn't have a passport. If I wasn't traveling outside the United States, what the hell did I need a passport for? Yes, it costs money, but it's also inconvenient to get. It's not like a simple thing to have. And if you're not traveling, you don't have a passport. And so, that is ultimately the goal of the Republican Party, to disenfranchise married women who change their last names, to make it harder for everyone to register. And ultimately, what are we all waiting for right now in the U.S. Supreme Court? We're waiting for a decision in a case involving birthright citizenship. And why is it that a birth certificate proves citizenship? Because of birthright citizenship. If Donald Trump gets his way, even a birth certificate won't prove citizenship. Because the whole reason why a birth certificate counts is because of birthright citizenship. And if you think this sounds extreme, how did you first come to know Donald Trump as a political figure? I'm not talking about as a tabloid figure, not talking about as a reality TV figure. I mean, as a political figure. It was the lie around Barack Obama, where he was born and whether or not he was eligible to be president, whether he was born in the United States. And when the state of Hawaii produced his birth certificate, when Barack Obama produced his birth certificate showing he was born in a hospital in Honolulu, Hawaii, Donald Trump said it was a forgery. So, we talk about the lists that the Department of Justice wants to put together, or the Trump administration wants to put together, and people are like, well, what's the problem? I'll be on the list. You'll be on the list, Mark. What do you have to worry about? I don't know. Donald Trump said that the state of Hawaii, when it produced proof that Barack Obama was born in the United States, that was a forgery. That is what we are up against. We're up against people who are not interested in getting to the truth. They are interested in distorting it and in lying and in disenfranchising their political opponents, prosecuting their political opponents, and ultimately subverting democracy.
And retaining power by any means necessary. I mean, I am a naturalized citizen, but one of the things they're talking about right now is denaturalization, picking people that are not American enough or, aren't causing problems for America and saying you no longer are a citizen. I think I'm going to be on that list pretty soon too. I mean, it's really quite shocking what we're seeing. And I think everybody who is a voter in America, whether you're a Republican voter or an independent voter, or you're going to be talking to your family members who are Republican voters, you can say once you start disenfranchising one group, don't think they're not coming for other groups, because if they don't need you to stay in power, if they have disenfranchised anyone that could vote against you, that's how you end up with a data center in your backyard, even though every single one of you voted against it. That's how you end up with poisoned water, because the corporations paid the government and the government doesn't have to listen to you anymore because they've drawn anyone who would argue with them out of power. And before you go, I just want you to talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on the current Supreme Court and this idea that Dems cannot just come back into power politically. We need to be running on court reform and on changing this so that at least one other branch of government is back on the line of the law.
Yeah, look, I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to come on your program is because you talk about the intersection between court reform and some of the issues you just talked about, a living wage and data centers and the like. And I sometimes feel like Democrats, they are like, we cannot talk about these democracy issues that I care so much about, voting rights, court reform and the like, because they are not inflation. They are not jobs. They are not data centers. And we need to understand it's not either or, right? These things are reinforcing each other. And so when Democrats retake power, it is critical that reforming the courts to make them work for the American people has to be a top priority. Ensuring voting rights has to be a top priority. I mean, the fact is that 9 justices is not written in the Constitution. 9 justices is a historical accident. It is not. It just happened to land at 9 for reasons we could do a whole episode on. But it was random. It was not. It was not thought through as like the magic number. And so I started earlier by saying that there were elements of the Biden era that I think were too bound to nostalgia. They were too bound to norms. They didn't want to change fundamental structures of the way in which our government operates, even though those structures weren't working for the American people. And there is a good argument, by the way, that the Supreme Court, irrespective of its partisan lean, irrespective of its ideological lean, that the country's just gotten too big to have only 9 justices on the Supreme Court, that they hear too few cases, that they are not able to respond to all of the challenges that a big democracy of our size and a big country of our size has. So yeah, we need court reform, and we need Democrats to embrace these kinds of democracy issues on the same terms that you do, and in the way in which you put it on and you show the connectiveness between these democracy issues and those other sort of kitchen table issues.
Yeah, I've always been a big proponent. I mean, obviously, the easy one is, 9 districts used to be the amount of federal districts that we had. Now we have 13 federal districts. So we could say, well, we must have 13 Supreme Court justices. But I'm a big believer in it should be even bigger than that. I think we should have 27 Supreme Court justices. I think we could have 3 courts of 9. We could have 2 courts of 13. We could have an extra person that floats so someone could get sick. Someone can, go to the hospital. We can have this kind of thing. And they could hear so many more cases, and they should pick their cases at random. So you don't know which makeup of justices you're going to get as you stand before them. So then it has to go back to the merits of the case and not to what the political makeup of the people on the court are at that time. I think we should have far more justices on the Supreme Court. And I'm actually not even against the 18-year term limit on them. This lifetime appointment thing, it'll take some changing because that's in the Constitution. But I do think that it is too long, and these people are just dying in office because they're too afraid for the wrong president to nominate their successor. As we leave, do you have any notes for people that are feeling like the votes are just going to be stolen, that their vote isn't going to be counted in 26, that they're going to be purged from the voter rolls, that, everything is going to be gerrymandered, that the Republicans have won anything? What can you tell people as we go into 26 to be keeping in mind, to be looking out for as we go into the November midterms? Because clearly we know that Trump and the Republicans are going to do everything they can to hold on to power, to use every weapon in their arsenal to make sure we can't flip the House and the Senate. How do we move forward into this next sort of period of time to make sure that our votes are counted and that our will is respected?
Yeah. So 3 things. Number 1, make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you know the voting rules and you have a plan to vote. Like we talked a lot about how the rules can change and how Republicans try to suppress it. But the bottom line is that you need to first make sure you are registered, that registration has not been canceled, has not been changed, you haven't moved, whatever it is. You need to check your voter registration, and you then need to make sure you have a plan to vote. You know, you mentioned that you like to get a mail-in ballot and drop it in a drop box. That's great if that's your preferred method of voting. I like voting in person. I grew up voting in person. I like to go in person. I like to fill out the ballot and turn it into an election office. Some people like to early vote. Some people, you said you like to wait closer to election day. I like to wait closer to the election day. If I early vote, I do it right before election day, or else I do election day. There's no right or wrong answer to this. It's whatever your plan is going to suit you. So, but you need to know what that is, and you need to have a plan to vote. So that's number one. Number two is you need to stay informed. And you need to have good information, and you need to have that not only so that you and your family and your friends don't get misled and you don't lose hope, but also because you need to be yourselves ambassadors of good news and ambassadors of correct news and ambassadors of the truth. And so one of the reasons why I said to subscribe to this channel is that that's what you get here. You're going to get armed with the facts you need to then go forward and share this video with a friend. You can click the share button right now, to take what you've learned here and post it on social media, to go to your book club or your bowling league or your dinner table or your friends at work and share this information. So you need to be not just voters, but you need to be ambassadors for voting, right? You need to be someone who is able to stand up for good news. And then the final thing that I want to say is it is easy in the dark moments that we have to lose hope, but we can't do that. Donald Trump wants you to believe that you are powerless. He wants you to believe that there is nothing you can do, that the courts are rigged against you, the executive branch rigged against you, Congress will never do anything. He wants you to give up. We can't give him that power. So we need to be realistic. We need to be clear-eyed about what we're up against. We need to stay in allyship with people who are in the fight with us. But we cannot lose hope, because that is the superpower that we will exercise. And with that hope, we will take control of Congress in 2026 and then the presidency in 2028.
Yeah. And then we can start making real change. Enough of this incrementalism. Real change for the American people. Thank you so much, Marc. I love talking to you. I hope you'll come back again. I can't believe I haven't talked to you on this show since January. Far too long.
Anytime you invite me, I will be here. That's it. Make sure she doesn't cut that out. And you guys tell her to have me back again.
I love seeing you. Thank you for all your hard work. Please, please keep it up and don't lose hope yourself.
All right. Thanks.
See ya. So that was my friend Marc Elias, reminding us that we can't just be voters. We have to be ambassadors for voting. That Donald Trump and the Republicans, with an assist from the Supreme Court, seem willing to do anything they can to make sure they retain power in 26, regardless of the will of the voters. That what's happening with the voter fraud narrative in California isn't just sour grapes, but a disinformation wave that is growing to build a case that votes can't be trusted, that they need a national list, that they must have the SAVE Act, that we have to abandon drop boxes and mail-in voting and counting votes after Election Day. It's not about limiting fraud. It's about limiting voting. And you have to ask yourself, what kind of government works this hard to limit voting? A government that knows the people aren't happy with their leadership and that their votes will reflect that. I want to thank Marc for joining us today and you for caring enough about democracy to be here. Now go and check your voter registration to make sure you and your people are still on the list. Until next week, PG out. Before you go, I just want to say that I appreciate so much what Marc said in the episode about the importance of independent media in a time of lies and disinformation. So I'm just going to play what he said again because I couldn't have said it any better myself.
You know, you have been part of building a progressive, truth-telling new media ecosystem that is more necessary than ever before. The legacy media is failing. They are failing democracy. They are failing businesses. And you have been at the forefront of helping build something that gives people the information they need about what's happening in their communities, what's happening in their democracy. And the price of that is that you get these these scurrilous attacks. And so I want to thank you for standing up to them. I want to thank you for everything you do. And I hope everyone who is watching this goes ahead and subscribes to this channel to make sure that you are able to build your voice so that it has the power and the reach that we need it to have as we head towards 2026 and beyond. So if people can do me a favor, and right now, click the subscribe button, hit the bell to make sure you're alerted when there's new content, because we need Lee to be reaching more people in more places than is currently the case.
Thank you to Marc, and thank you to anyone who likes and supports and follows the work we do over here at the Politics Girl Project. I am so deeply grateful. The Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.